Hello, I hope everybody's having a wonderful day. Today we are going to be reviewing Knowledge from the Infant's Point of View, which is Chapter 3 from our text, Teaching and Learning with Infants and Toddlers, Where Meaning Making Begins by Mary Jane McGuire Fong. And this is really going to cover how infants learn. Children come into this world inquisitive. They're programmed to learn and make meaning of the world around them. A good example of this is the toddler why phase. In this phase, a toddler might ask why as a response to everything from what is your name, followed by why, color is that, why, and so on and so forth, which is a great example of them wanting to know more about everything involved in their environment and in their conversations. But before expressive language is even acquired, children are seeking information. Infants and toddlers can be viewed, as we've talked about before, as little scientists actively investigating objects and people. Like sponges, they're constantly absorbing information, organizing and reorganizing ideas, as well as continually constructing knowledge. In this picture, there are 4 toddlers exploring duct tape. What do you notice? Can you imagine what each child might be thinking? Think about how they might be building knowledge, and in what ways are their senses and actions being used to gather information. Here we have children exploring paint and pine cones. What do you think was the teacher's intent for this experience? How closely does it match what each child's focus of attention is on? Maybe it was Christmas and they were making ornaments, but look at how each of them is focused on the paint in their hands. These children are definitely taking an active approach to constructing knowledge through available materials. So often the learning happens not through what is planned for the child, but through how the child explores and investigates the materials and people in their environment. Science tells us that infants gather and organize information. They hypothesize, experiment, construct ideas, and they acquire information from the people in their lives. These ways of acquiring information fall into 3 categories, which John Piaget refers to as 3 types of knowledge. That's physical knowledge, logical mathematical knowledge, and social knowledge. Physical knowledge is obtained through interacting with objects and people and exploring their physical properties, such as shape, size, weight, smell, sound. So in this way, they're gathering and organizing information. Logical mathematical knowledge is also obtained through interacting with objects and people, but this type of knowledge is specific to grouping into relationships that exist in their mind rather than in the physical world. For example, number, classification, seriation are all mental relationships. The infant is building logical mathematical knowledge by hypothesizing, experimenting, and constructing ideas. Lastly, social knowledge is different from physical and logical mathematical knowledge in that it is not built from exploring the physical world, but instead is acquired through interaction with people. Things like language and behavioral expectations are transmitted to the child rather than sought out through active exploration. Look at these pictures of Talia exploring dandelions. While I read the observation, think of the social knowledge acquired. Talia picks out a dandelion seed puff and blows on it, watching the small seeds fly away. She selects a rose from the bag, rubs it gently across the tip of her nose, and stares at it before gently pinching one small petal. She shakes the rose and watches as several loose petals fall to the ground. Teacher Jane comments, "You like the roses, don't you, Talia?" "Roses," Talia echoes in delight. Nearby, Louis pulls from the bag a twig with maple leaves. "I wonder if you can pull off some of the leaves, Louis. Do you want to try?" Thinking of language and behavior, social norms and culture, what social knowledge could be acquired? in such a brief interaction. Let's look again at the picture of the children painting pine cones. After we have reviewed the 3 types of knowledge, we can break down the ways in which knowledge is being built. What physical knowledge is being built here? How? Is there logico-mathematical knowledge being built? How? What do we know about the child as a learner? In the words of Loris Malaguzzi, a bulky child is one who is full of amazing competence in gathering and organizing a vast amount of information. Children are active meaning makers, and they're highly curious and constantly building increasingly more complex knowledge. This doesn't just happen within planned activities. On the contrary, this happens during everyday moments of play and interaction. After talking about how infants learn, now let's shift gears and discuss a little bit about what it means to teach infants. What does curriculum for this age group look like, and how do we support their development? One important thing to understand is that everything happening across the day can be and is a learning experience for infants and toddlers. They're learning in the context of their environment, including play spaces, daily care routines, as well as conversations that take place. Play spaces are an impactful tool for teaching, and when set up with thoughtful and intentional planning, can create an environment for learning. This approach of thoughtful and intentional planning and setup is a large component of curriculum. Children are learning through care routines, which we will go more into depth later in the semester. But care routines are a prime time to involve the infants as an active participant and allow them to engage and use all of their emerging skills. When care routines such as diapering, toileting, hand washing, and meals are seen as an opportunity for learning, or as a context for learning, then an otherwise rushed and possibly stressful situation can become a meaningful and rewarding interaction for both the child and the caregiver. Lastly, conversations are a context for learning. As mentioned before, language itself is an important component of social knowledge. It's through conversation that things like behavior, expectations, customs, and beliefs are shared and learned. In our text, Mary J. McGuire-Fong refers to a shared sense of the ordinary. Through stories and conversations, infants are able to begin to make sense of their surroundings, including people, community, and culture. Here's a picture of an environment in an infant-toddler center that we will use in as an example of utilizing play space as a context for learning. Looking at this picture, can you identify a way in which this room was set up to support learning and exploration? We can see that infants have continuous access to the toys and materials. Another component is regularly rotating and introducing new toys and materials. The room is thoughtfully designed in that the traffic space is taken into consideration, and there are appropriate storage containers for toys and materials. The ones used in this picture are clear so the children can easily see what's in them. Also, we can see that each space is distinct, such as large motor, manipulatives, and cozy area. If we look at a close-up of the table, we can see an activity that was set out. But what do you think the intention was behind setting out these specific materials? Something that may look so simple can provide so many learning opportunities. What do you see when you look at this setup? There are some colorful circular weighted discs and some paper with black and white photocopies of the discs. What do you think this planned experience might teach? In what ways does the space and these materials support learning? What physical knowledge might an infant or toddler learn from exploring these materials? Now let's look at some pictures of children engaged in routine care. Here we have a group of children at a table for a meal with their care teacher. This is such a great example of children learning through a routine, such as a meal. Infants gather information and apply ideas and skills during this time, as well as diapering, napping, dressing, and arrival and departures. The great part about utilizing routine care as learning experiences is that they happen throughout the day, every day. So time that could be rushed through or overlooked as opportunity for learning can instead be viewed and utilized as prime time for building relationships, engaging in conversation, and supporting growth in all three areas of knowledge: physical, logical, mathematical, and social. I just love the eye contact being made here. What do you think is happening in this social interaction? And the little one leaning over to look at her peers? We can't see her line of gaze, but there's a lot happening over there for her to look at. The child that is about to pour, or the child that holding their cup and taking a drink, all has opportunity for learning. This is another picture of the same little guy that was attempting to pour in the previous picture. But here, he's going about it differently. What do you notice about the change or development in skills from the first picture to this one? Thinking about routines as a context for learning, from the pictures we just looked at, what did you notice? How did these infants reveal their thinking? And what did the adults do to make this learning possible? Lastly, let's talk about conversations as a context for learning. Like routines, conversations are another thing that just happen throughout the day. When looked at as a form of curriculum, conversations can be utilized in so many different ways to support learning. During conversations and interactions, those caring for infants provide social knowledge. From describing what is occurring or what is going to occur next in the routine of the day, to behavioral expectations and what is okay and what is not and why, guidance in social interactions and making friends and keeping them, and through stories, songs, and rituals of the culture, social knowledge is provided. This is a teacher observation from an interaction with a child. She says, "I set out paper and large pens in the toddler room. Naomi arrived and made large squiggles on a paper. I asked if I could write her name on the paper. She nodded. As I wrote each letter of her name, I said each letter name aloud. Naomi watched me, and then with her pen she began to make discrete marks, lifting and dropping the pen on the paper. As she did so, she softly repeated A-O. She continued making these marks and saying these letters for a minute or so." What social knowledge did Naomi gain from this experience? What learning opportunities would have been missed without the use of language provided by the teacher? What knowledge did the teacher gain about Naomi from this interaction? How could this knowledge be used to support Naomi's development and interests in the future? It is important to keep in mind that all of what infants learn is embedded in culture. The knowledge they gain, whether it be physical, logical, mathematical, or social, reflects the values, beliefs, and attitudes of those who provide their care. Since these areas differ amongst cultures, so does what children learn. Values, beliefs, and attitudes also change within a culture over time, and so the social knowledge that infants acquire is really dependent on where they are born, when, and to whom. Come back to the PDF of the slides and click here on this link to view a short clip from the movie Babies, which I hope we will be able to watch later in the semester if we have time. It's a beautiful depiction of the experience of being a baby from a global perspective.